I don't know if folks at home can see this, but you have the sheet music on the piano here, but I'm not sure that if anybody had the sheet music, it would sound quite like that.
No, I
Not only for the artistry, but I think that you were improvising
Yeah,
along the way.
I did. I've been writing a bunch of solo pieces, and I wrote them in such a way that I left room for improvisation. And whoever's performing them can either stick to the notes or put their own interpretation. And I was doing that and trying different things because, as I said, this still is a work in progress. There's a couple chords here and there that I'm going to change when I go home.
But the heart of jazz is improvisation,
It
isn't
is
it?
improvisation.
So no piece is going to sound the same way twice.
Never, ever.
When you did the In Crowd, which we heard at the beginning of the show, it of course was a huge hit, and it was followed up by a couple other huge hits. And then the direction of your career went a little more pop, which for purists of jazz was just sacrilegious, as you probably know. But it got that sound into the ears of the public. Was that intentional, or was that just the way your career was going?
It evolved that way up until the In Crowd. The In Crowd was our 17th album, and Hang On Sloopy and those records came out shortly after. The record company said, "Why don't you just do one album of all of those kind of songs?" So Wade in the Water came out. We did that. And we figured, well, that's the end of it. I mean, we had Wade in the Water and other songs, 12 songs. But that only cemented that direction. People, oh, yeah, more and more. And so you're at a period in your life where this feels pretty good, you know?
It felt pretty good musically, or it felt pretty good because of the attention that you were getting?
Musically, it felt good because there was appreciation coming from most quarters. And it's great to be able to pay your taxes and buy a new car and send your kids to school and do all those things. And so
But I guess that was part of the criticism, that you were selling out on your artistry. Did you feel it like that at all?
No, because all the songs that I've ever played, all the songs that I've ever recorded are songs that I liked. Fortunately, I went to a multicultural high school, Wells High School. There were Latinos, black, you name it. And so there was all kinds of music going around. And my parents never said, don't listen to this kind of music, don't listen to that kind of music. So I grew up just appreciating music in general. So I always liked classical music. And once I got into jazz at 16 years old, I started listening to all kinds of things. And to this day, there are songs that I play that are not from the jazz genre, if you will.
And you put out your first album when you were a mere lad of 20 or 21
Yeah.
In 1956, and it was called Ramsey Lewis and His Gentlemen of Swing, which, by the way, has one of the coolest album covers, I think, of any record ever produced. We're seeing it there. But it's interesting that you call that His Gentlemen of Swing, and it wasn't until your second album that you had His Gentlemen of Jazz. Why was that?
Well, L.D. Young, Red Holt, they were in the original group, of course, and we had a mentor. Daddy O'Daly was a very popular jazz disc jockey, and we didn't have a name for the album. And so he's the one. I was thinking jazz all the time, but Daddy was from an older school, and he says, you know, you guys swing. So he's looking at it from that side of it. So call it Ramsey Lewis and Gentlemen of Swing. It was the second album that we finally got Jazz, Ramsey Lewis and the Gentlemen of Jazz.
Your sister Lucille, again, has written that when you were all young, your father would take you to the Regal Theater and the Chicago Theater, and that you would see the greats, the Duke Ellington, Count Basie,
yeah.
Ella Fitzgerald.
Yeah.
But Ravinia was out of reach. Was that the Valhalla for the Lewis family?
Well, the first step in that direction was the London House in Chicago. I used to pass there going to school to get my piano lessons, and I was on the bus going across the Wabash Bridge towards downtown, the Chicago River, and you look up towards Wacker in Michigan. There's this restaurant, Have a Date with the Steak Tonight, the London House, appearing tonight Oscar Peterson, appearing tonight Billy Taylor, George Shearing. So that was the first kind of, wonder how that would be. And then, of course, we had always heard about Ravinia, you know, the place to play. And after the hit record, after the In Crowd, we were invited to play there.
And that was in 1966 that your association with Ravinia
It began then, and it continues.
And it continues, and you were appointed, I believe, the director of jazz in the
Yes.
early 90s, and then you started a mentoring program there as well.
Yes.
So again, not only was jazz being taken more seriously after that, but it was cultivated under your tutelage, isn't that right?
Well, jazz had always been performed at Ravinia, people like Benny Goodman and others way back. But Zarin Mehta and now Wells Kaufman kind of concentrated on the music, knowing how important it is. And so they invited me to become a part of it to sort of accentuate the direction that it might go. And I'm having a lot of fun doing that.
And of course, you're no stranger to this building. You had a radio show called Legends of Jazz, and it continued as part of a PBS series, which you taped right in this building. And again, you were showcasing jazz performers that otherwise may not be seen by a television audience. In fact, I believe it was the first television series devoted to jazz in
many,
more than
many,
40
many
years. Again, was this all part of, first of all, the transition from being a performer to being this multimedia artist, not only radio and television? Was that pretty easy for you?
Yeah, it was. At first, I kind of had to think about it, but Billy Taylor, who had walked that path already, he had been in radio, had been in television, I called him, and he gave me the greatest advice ever. And he said, Ramsey, the reason they want you is because of what you're about. So just be yourself and trust that you're going to do and say the right thing. And so I relaxed, and radio developed, and television, Legends of Jazz. And there's another Legends of Jazz on the burner. All we need is a sponsor. So if there's anybody out there wants to sponsor
we can turn this into a pledge drive very quickly here. But yes, if there's funding, we'd like to obviously do another series, or another season of that. Along the way, you returned to your gospel roots, and you even made an arrangement of gospel songs. Was it for your sister?
Well, you know, my sister's always said, she also calls me Sonny, at the end of your show, you always play this medley of songs. Why don't you do an album? I said, okay, I will, but I didn't get to it. And I don't know what happened, but the stars all lined up, and Lucille called and said, isn't it time? And
could you give us a little sampling of that, which you still perform at concerts?
Well, it starts. It starts out like that. Well, anyway, it continues.
And this is what we would have heard at the Wayman AME Church back in on the north
kind
side.
of music that I was playing.
Minus the choir, of course. Which
well, I was accompanying the choir playing that particular song, Precious Lord, Take My Hand.
who are the up-and-coming jazz artists? Who's carrying the flame these days that you'd like to promote?
I heard Gerald Clayton play piano, the son of John Clayton, the great bass player. Plays a lot of piano. We're going to try to get him up at Ravinia. I heard Vijay Eiler, another wonderful piano player. I heard young Strickland, I forgot his first name, but he's a young fellow that plays saxophone. His brother plays drums. There are a large group of young people that need to be heard, and Wells Kaufman and I are going to talk about developing some program to get these people wider recognition, because they could, there's 10 or 20 of them that could be the Oscar Petersons, the Dave Brubecks, and the John Coltrane's of the future, but they must be exposed.
And they have to be mentored.
They have to be mentored.
Of your more than 80 albums, for folks who need to have a Ramsey Lewis disc in their collections, which ones would you recommend?
Mother Nature's Son is important. I would suggest that. I would suggest, of course, if you don't have the in crowd by now, that's important. Appassionata is a good album, I think.
Now, do you remember what years those came out?
Well, of course, the
Well,
In Crowd is
In-Crowd is
1965, and Mother Nature's Son, arrangements by Charles Stepney, unusual album, because I didn't want to do it. It was arrangements of the Beatles' White Album. And I said, you know, they do them good, but I don't want to. Let them. He says, no, Ramsey, just let me do this. Anyway, that turned out very well, and that was 1969.
Did you get feedback from the Beatles, by the way, since you were doing their songs in jazz form?
No,
while they were
no. A
still
lot
together?
of people ask me that because the album became fairly popular. So I don't know if they ever heard it or any of them heard it. Maybe next time I run into Ringo, I'll.
You might as well ask while you can.
Right.
Now, we mentioned that your last album, which came out last year, was all songs that you wrote. It's called Songs from My Heart, or Songs from the Heart.
Songs from the Heart.
And you're working on another one, as you mentioned, that will be more songs from your heart.
Yeah, yeah. The composition, blood in me continues to flow, and I continue to compose. And now I'm composing a series of solo pieces. One of them, you heard it here. And we're going to perfect that. Next time you hear it, it'll be a little more polished.
It sounded magnificent, just as it is right now.
Thank
but
you.
More polished. Well, Ramsey Lewis, we look forward to your career continuing for many more years. You're celebrating a milestone birthday this year.
I'll be 75 in May.
Goodness. But you don't look a day over. Honestly, you look fantastic.
Oh, watch it.
You don't look a day over 30.
Okay.
So let's 39.
All right.
We'll give you Jack Benny's age.
I'll buy that.
You're not only going to perform a final song here for us to take us out, but you'll be performing another one, a Coltrane tune, which will be exclusively put on our website, and folks can go to that.
I'll do that.
Continued success. Thank you for being here.
Good being with you.
That's it for this edition of the Friday Night Show, and here's Ramsey Lewis with solo piece number 3, still untitled.
Still untitled.
Closed captioning for this program is made possible in part by the generous support of Robert A. Clifford and Clifford Law Offices, a personal injury firm.